Well, welcome to the Alt Funds Network podcast. Here, myself, Skylar Steinke, with my co-host Mike Schroder, and today we have Francisco Quartin de Macedo with NHD Capital. Francisco, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, super excited.
Yeah, this is great. Well, maybe we can kick it off, Francisco. Maybe tell us a little bit about your background, and we'll catch up to kind of where we're at present day, what you're doing with your fund, and all the other exciting things that we want to talk about today.
Yeah, I would describe myself, as someone that was raised like for accomplishments. Honestly, like my education was always about. So I have this bit of autistic profile. I didn't have too many friends. I was always, playing with games, numbers. Like I love numbers. Like that's the thing. That's the core, right? So when I was 4 years old, I was kind of diagnosed as this person more towards numbers and this type of thing. I didn't want to play with like normal toys. I was just making statistics, like since I was a little kid. And uh, more than that, I think if I was like that, but I didn't have also someone like my mother to really drive me into kind of, accomplishment mode, I would probably have even got lost with kind of the fun stuff of the world and like playing with numbers, but not actually materializing it. I did become someone who was really into accomplishments. When I was 14 years old, I found a way to make money in sports betting. I was just always looking for inefficiencies in systems, but as a fun game.
Yeah.
And so I started to make money doing sports betting at 14 years old. I mean, starting from very basic things like betting on events that already happened, things like this, trying to play with lags and delays. But then later I got a lot more sophisticated using, statistics and data. But funny enough, I still decided to go as an academic, kind of path in parallel. So yeah, I guess that's interesting because I was doing a PhD in mathematics at the same time that I was being entrepreneur by making money on my own. And so I think now looking back, I think one of the main kind of things that broke in my head, like that made it like, shine, was the fact that I didn't want to depend on a salary, right? Like I saw my parents, struggling to get a salary, working on things they didn't like, always under pressure. And I was making money doing betting, and I was making a lot more than the salary. Like it's very hard to then convince someone, oh look, the society should be all about salaries. So I was very lucky by my circumstance and by natural circumstance, not by something I decided to do, to just really be in a place in a time where, yeah, things were just naturally, the lesson was very natural. I didn't read it in the book. I was just living it, and so I could never feel it as something that was relevant. And so when I finished the PhD, it was a nice mix because I had money from what I was doing before. I could decide where to work. The PhD was in mathematics, and nowadays mathematics is like the most important thing. It was even specialized in data, statistics, machine learning. So you have all the options.
Yeah.
But I just decided to start in sports betting actually in the company. But then I realized quite quickly that I prefer to be kind of Robin Hood and just kind of take money from the betting house to give to people rather than working for them. And so I quickly realized I don't want to be there. It was funny still because I could understand a bit better why it was so easy to make money from them, and why, because they make so much money already that they just want to launch new markets. They don't really care about fixing models. So there's holes everywhere, to be honest. I mean, of course, it's something that I can say openly because I'm still making money there and it's easy. But at the same time,
let's dive into sports betting a little bit. So you're 14 years old. How does this even come about? I assume you probably have to have your parents, or maybe they didn't even AML KYC.
No, exactly. Yeah. So what happened was during Euro 2004 in Portugal. So we had the football competition here. They were distributing these free bets of 10 euros, in this kind of, there was this giant screen showing the matches and people would get these free bets. I took like 10 of those, 10 of the 10 euro free bets in the streets, opened account for my mother, my father, my godmother, and like everyone, right? and then I converted that into 5,000 euros in a couple of months just because it was really given things. So it wasn't like a probability game or whatever. No, it was sure things. I was listening to goals from a stadium, betting on the goal when it happened already. There was a bit of a trick there to make sure.
So there's a lag.
Yeah, there was lag, but they protect themselves with a delay. You need to wait for a certain time, until you can bet. But I would place the bet. It would start going like the kind of the bar. And if the goal happened, I would let it go to the end. If it didn't, I would refresh. So you can compensate for those 9-second lag by just placing the bet beforehand. And if it happens, you wait until the end. If it doesn't, you just click on refresh. And it would work well because they wouldn't. So the bet, you can control if the bet goes and gets placed by refreshing or not. That's what I realized. by that time I would just do whatever I wanted because there was a lag. They were trying to compensate with a certain bar, and I was canceling the bar. And that was the first thing. And I realized a little bit of those things. Like you realize something, and then you go like, "Is there allowing people to make money like this? There must be other ways, And so, yeah, Formula One, winter sports, cycling. It's still very easy, to be honest. Like I have to be, the only problem is capacity. You cannot really scale to a huge capacity. It's quite hard, And so that's why I decided to focus more on a different field because my core is really finding inefficiencies. Like, of course, sports betting was easy for me because I watched a lot of sports, but the principles were applied to any field as long as there's inefficiencies, And so, of course, in crypto, because it's a relatively new field still, what hedge funds could do in the 90s, you can still do in crypto, which is, quite easy. So, yeah, that's the whole game, nowadays. So, yeah, but I can tell you, like, I would still be able to make a lot of money in sports betting. It's just really about putting priority on the things that you can scale. That's really kind of the only argument. I could just stay home betting on sports, but it's not fun anymore. It's too long.
All right, so you're 40 years old. You cause these tax issues for your whole family.
It's fun.
And then kind of what's your crypto story? How'd you get to the crypto side of things?
So yeah, after leaving Bet365, I didn't want to be, working for the big guys who are placing the odds because they didn't even allow me to change much, to be honest. It was just like, there's this established system, I don't want to touch it, So that's how they reacted to my proposal. So I was like, yeah, no, I'm not good here. I get invited to go to a hedge fund in London. The hedge fund was for sports betting. So they were going to give me money to bet, And the day I arrived, so I moved to London, and the day I arrived, they tell me, Francisco, do you like crypto? And I was like, I was under the impression this was a sports betting role. And they're like, well, but this company may acquire us, and so I had two options. Either I would go and find another job in sports betting, which would have been very easy because I have actually two offers simultaneously when I picked this one, or go home and sing. I can just bet on the side and I can have a job in crypto. So it's like two different things that give me different types of leverage. Right. And when I realized what the field was about and I started to read about it, I was like, I'm so glad I came across it in 2018, And it still felt late as everything, right? Like I always remembered some people mentioning crypto before. I'm like, oh, maybe I'm late to this party, And no, I mean, no one was into crypto. I went to work at blockchain.com. That was the company that acquired the hedge fund I was in. They acquired the company just for the data science talent. It wasn't for sports betting at all. Mm-hmm. But in the end, it was all PhD people, data science. So of course they were using us to, leverage what they were trying to build. But after a couple of months, I wasn't really kind of into the data science team in the sense that the people were amazing, but I didn't want to just be providing reports for someone else to decide something. Like I that's not my thing. Like I'm not going to work for someone and just, not be the one in charge. And so I asked to become a trader, to go to the trading team. They said, no, but you're a sports betting trader, not a crypto trader. And I was like, I find holes and I can systematize things because I'm a mathematician and I've been coding my whole life, And I said, like, the manual traders, I'm not doing anything here. What you need is a systematic trading desk. That's it, So we go from 3 people to 20 people, 20 million AUM to 300 million. Basically, they assigned to me as prop trading, right, inside the company. Yeah. And that was the rest of the story. Like in history, like 2022, I basically thought it was time to move on. I mean, either I would get some role, like a big role as a board member or whatever, which was not realistic because I was just basically like managing the trading desk. It wasn't really, I didn't have experience in boards or anything, so I knew that they were not going to give it to me. But I still kind of asked, And after that, it was clear I had to move on. The 2 years after, I was managing my own money, not bothering too much, still betting, on the side, and so I didn't have too much pressure to go back to anything. And I was still pretty burned out because I was 24/7 monitoring alerts and stuff like that. Yeah. And so after that, I was a bit more chilled. I was exploring a bit the Web3 world, the startup world, understanding a bit better how things work. I wasn't too excited because I realized how things work as a startup, founder, as a business angel. After also kind of I had both dynamics, and this dance of trying to find the investors and the investors trying to show off as investors because they have money. It's a bit tricky. I think some people do it for good, but there's also a lot of community of kind of the founders really need money, and so it's they're doing their thing. The investors sometimes are kind of being feeling a bit too trapped because I went to conferences where people were just throwing decks at me, and it wasn't easy,
Okay, so you're at blockchain.com. When do you leave, and when did you start your fund?
Yeah. So May 2022, that's when I decided to to be honest, I think it was pretty clear a couple of months before, but that was when things actually ended up happening. But then that's it. The last 2 years. So sorry, 2022 until I would say mid 2023. So like for a year more or less, I was just really kind of doing my thing, recovering from all the burnout and all of that, just kind of really slowing down, but trading on the side, of course. I never kind of quit that side of things because it's fun for me. I just kept looking at things, trying to find opportunities. And then this idea starts to come in my head, like, should I actually start a fund? And the main motivator for that was that people were asking me to be LPs, because I have what people don't usually have, which is potential investors. What I didn't have was the kind of the drive I had, but like the motivation to go for it, And so I think, that's when I started to really think deeply. I started to do coaching and psychology. Like I had a therapist, since, a couple of years already. And I really started to understand that the path of society needs to go through mental health, consciousness, and people need to be more aware. That's when everything changed, right? So I started to take, silence retreats, go to all of these different things, trying to be more aware of myself. And so this first step starts of being more aware, understanding like the world needs to change like urgently. And I talk to some lawyers and I go like, guys, look, I want to build a foundation. I want people to be more aware. I want to build like a consciousness foundation. Yeah. And they tell me, well, okay, but how much money do you have? Do you have some company generating money for you? I'm like, I have a good amount, but they were like, no, but that drains, like if you just put your own money, it's tricky, Mm-hmm. That's when I was like, look, this is obvious. This is the answer. I know how to make money. If people want to give me money, why not create a hedge fund? And of course, in my head, the problem was I didn't want to be associated with the guy of the yachts and the hedge fund traditional thing, right? But it's an opportunity to actually create a whole new concept where you create a hedge fund, but you change the perception of what you do with the money, right? You don't just optimize for tax. You don't just, you actually can put it in a foundation that does something.
Okay.
Let's be clear. This is kind of a scale up of what I've been doing all my life, because I was making money in sports betting, investing in companies, but not from a perspective of the return, more on the perspective of I want to help this founder. This guy's a good guy. I want to give him a chance, So what I want to do is just scale that to a professional level, because for me, if trading is professional, why not also do the investment side and the donation side and the impact side in a very
okay. So we got a lot to unpack here. So we're gonna bounce around a little bit, but let's start with like the mental health side of things. So kind of what are you doing on this side of things? I guess to start, and then we'll kind of go back into like how you got into it.
Yeah, just from a time frame perspective, this was right after you left. You started your fund. Was at the time of burnout you mentioned? This is kind of this time in your journey.
Yeah, I think, when I left in May 2022, as I said, I was for a year and something, I was just, exploring. Still my trading, still my betting, but, more into the startup world and stuff like that, right? So, as I said, I went founder, investor. I was kind of trying to figure out what was the best way. But the thing was, in the middle of 2023, when I really thought that the foundation for consciousness was the right way to go, that's when the answer came to me, because I was a bit afraid to quit a hedge fund because of the reputation and people being seen as greedy and like all these assumptions of society. But if you have a tool to make money and if you can do good with that money, it's a no-brainer, right? And so that's mid 2023 is when the idea starts to come, right? So then, I started to talk to the lawyers, start to get the big picture, and then over the last 2 years, pretty much, we have been developing strategies, trying to understand what's the right format for the fund, like what's the right jurisdiction, etc. So what we have been doing is trading money from the actual people who are going to be the founders, and just testing things out. But now we are actually launching finally with 15 million in principle, maybe 20. But that's the thing, right? So the fund itself has been in setup mode, in the last 2 years, because it includes the stage of developing strategies, developing how to actually manage the risk, testing everything properly. I prefer to take it slow rather than going all in. And so it's been quite a nice journey, to be honest. And so, that's kind of the summary, I would say. I mean, I did get my founders and team kind of being built over these 2 years, So there's a lot there, like we can go through that. But now it's the actual ultimate point when we are going to launch finally, and it's been quite a journey, So now it's just hopefully the time to materialize and to make sure everyone gets the outcome they deserve. Yeah.
That's exciting. So let's maybe just a couple of things I want to unpack to Mike's point. Obviously, you're starting the fund, which is fantastic. And we'll get into maybe the strategy, what that looks like. But stepping back more to the mental health side. So when did you decide that was like financial freedom wasn't enough to make money? When did you decide this was important to you personally, and that tied to your evolution of, why you're starting the fund, right?
I'm trying to tell you like a summary of 3 stories, for example, because it's a process, right? So 2020, I start to work with a coach. I start to question everything I thought about myself. I start to unpack things of my past, my childhood, understand that I'm obsessed with accomplishments because of very specific things, not because I'm so special. I'm the guy who was made to be driven. No, like that's bullshit, So that's 2020, 2021. This period was when I started to kind of process things, even though my actions would still not be consistent. I would still work obsessively. I would still be full on. But slowly this started to kind of unravel. And then that's it. Small things that came into my head in these years, like people shouldn't have kids before they go through personal development. Ideas that for me are super obvious now, but that back then was just the start, right? And then I started to get obsessed, just like with everything else, just like with becoming the best trader, whatever. I started to get obsessed with having this foundation that changes the world of consciousness, right? Like makes people aware and brings this kind of, because people can tell me, let's fix the justice system, let's fix the healthcare. But if you had politicians, for example, who were proper people, empathic people, you wouldn't need all this kind of crap of trying to see if they are, doing things out of their own interests or if they're just in society. Like you just need good people. You just need people to get in touch with their root, with their actual self. They are good people. Everyone's good people. The problem is what happens when we come alive and all the crap we go through during our lives, And so you see that most successful founders, people that get exits, people who are in politicians now, they have been through terrible childhoods. They have been through trauma. They have been through, like, if you unpack that, it's very clear, right? I know mine. I've identified everything about me. Of course, made me an accomplishment machine. I can get whatever I want, but it's not the whole story, right? And that's what I'm trying to kind of change now. And funny enough, I think I'm going to be much more of a professional once I not finish the process. It's an ongoing thing, but all this growth brought me things that I thought, okay, I'm going to become softer, but more personally nice, But no, it's not like you lose your drive and you become a better person. No, like there's a lot of things I can identify that made me grow as a professional. That's why the best leadership role books you can find are definitely leadership roles about self-development. They're not about how do I speak in public and all these superficial things that you can say. No, it's about how do you work yourself out of imposter syndrome? How do I become actually a self-loving person that doesn't require validation of others, So there's many stories, of course, along the way where I have little like triggers, that made me really go deeper on this. But my conviction has been there for a while. Now I just feel like I'm embodying a bit more the whole thing, right? Because one thing is the theory, the awareness, then there's the embodiment, and that's the second step, and it takes forever.
Okay, so with that, what are you focusing on for like mental health and consciousness?
Yeah, so it's something that people are still not very open to talking about, but I've been diving into psychedelics. I've been diving into all these things that people thought of as, oh my God, so dangerous, it's going to kill you. And suddenly that's what people are using to stop their brain, to kind of go more from the brain to the mind, from the mind to the body. I've done a lot of things, right? I've done silence retreats. I've done different experiments, to be honest. I've been doing breathing every day, meditations and everything. But my brain is just too fast, too accelerated. Like I try to meditate and I'm supposed to slow down through that, and I do. But there's still a level of I go back and I'm just already accelerating again. And of course, I put myself in that situation because I'm always getting a tight schedule, a tight calendar. Like everything in my life has been made for let's optimize, right? And when you do that, it's very hard to slow down and be more creative. But the funny thing, and that's what I was saying, professionally speaking, I'm becoming much more creative and less executor, which I used to be a lot more because I was just trying to fulfill task lists and finish things, And that's a big difference. If you want to be a proper leader, you need to take time to actually think about things and not just run around, without the direction,
Yeah.
So that's one of the main things that changed for me, I didn't think before. I was just trying to prove to myself I could do as many things as possible. And sometimes, quantity over quality, it's not the best decision, even more as a decision maker, right?
Right.
And that's it, like I think that's really that. Like all these silence retreats, all these experiments have been really putting me in a better place. I journal also every day, right? So I write, and I really try to understand myself.
Yeah. So what do you want people to know on the health side then, in the consciousness side? Are you trying to get people to go to mental, like, health retreats, or
No,
kind of more
yeah.
avoid the
No,
burnout?
health retreats are actually quite dangerous. I mean, of course, it's like everything in life. It's not yes or no. It's not black or white, right? It's easier if you think of it that way, but it's not. Unfortunately.
Better for you too. You personally, everybody has a personal process a little bit as well.
Exactly. Yeah, look, and I think the main thing about retreats, and the main thing I've been noticing is that if you are not already aware enough, what's going to happen is you search for something. You go 3 days in the silence retreat, right? You're going to have the best time of your life. You're going to come back like, oh, I don't need a phone. I hate my life, But instead of trying to integrate and be that person every day and changing the things you need to change in your life, what these people tend to do is search for the next peak experience. So like, now I go to the next retreat. Now I go to the next retreat. So it becomes a business. Yeah, exactly. Because people sell that, right? It's like, okay, now you have a new retreat, you can do that. There's the next level, the upgrade now, And I do think there's a lot of things that are worth going through it. With my speed of brain, yes, I never stop thinking. So if I go to something that makes me stop thinking, I need that as a reset sometimes. Mm-hmm. But the most important is then what you do with that, right? You need to integrate. You need to kind of process things, implement routines in your day-to-day that are feasible, but that you can definitely hold on to, right? I'm not going to meditate 1 hour every day, right? I'm not. But if I stay grounded and I do 10 minutes 3 times a day, for example, whenever people say, oh, but I don't have time for that. No, I'm sorry. You have 10 minutes, right? All you don't have is the capacity to slow down the thoughts and be like, okay, I'm going to accept that it's time to stop, It's very hard. You have the traction, you are super quick, a lot of meetings, and like, I'm going to sit for 10 minutes, Mm-hmm. But after you do the 10 minutes, you feel better. But when you start it, it's a challenge.
Right.
And so I have all these little reset like systems for like a 10-minute recover that I just I've been 6 hours in meetings, I'm super stressed, and after 10 minutes I'm back, like that's amazing. But of course it depends on the level of traction, the level of acceleration you have, it's the more traction you have, the more it's going to be harder to stop,
Yeah. It's well, I can appreciate the kind of the thought process there, because I think a lot of people, to your point, they're driven, especially in our industry, as we talk about. It's all about, a lot of times it's a lot of ego. Trying to get to the next goal, next target, right? Bringing you back to more of a mindfulness, self-awareness, more emotional, spiritual growth. It's not about just the target or the money, or the accomplishment. Is about you, I guess, is what you're saying, and how you kind of had your journey from what you were passionate about to kind of figure out more of a self-discovery aspect. How are you kind of, so to Mike's point, like, what do you think what people should do? What would you convey to them as kind of their starting point for a journey? Is that something you're kind of advocating for? Or?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that are absolutely crucial. I think the advocating, so I can tell you that the funny thing about the foundation is that I've been thinking what's the best format for it, right? So the funny thing is, as I experience new things and as I learn more about myself, I learn more about what the world needs, right? So I cannot tell you the answer of like the foundation being a consciousness foundation. It needs to advocate for this. No, I don't know. Honestly, I'm starting with psychedelics. I'm starting with other experiences like that I think are mind-blowing and are going to be world-changing. But I cannot tell you yet. So what I do is I deploy some money into research and I do my own thing. I try something new. If I feel like there's an angle there, I pay some research on that field. And I just try to keep going as like, it's a personal development journey plus a foundation that's going to hopefully make an impact in the world. But it goes together with my personal growth, which is like, it's amazing. Like it's all incorporated, right? So it's quite fun.
Right. So you're taking the hedge fund as a kind of a incubator for opportunity to deploy in your foundation in your real life.
Correct.
Your passion.
Correct. So I of course I'm driven enough to create the $1 billion fund and just be driven to do that. But right now, because I'm trying to embrace myself and my actual needs and the things I want, I wouldn't start it if I wasn't really motivated by something bigger. And at this point, I really want to build it, But at the same time, I'm doing all the tests and all the pilots. Like I've been putting personal money for a long time already on these, right? Including that research, investing in mental health startups, And ultimately, I would say the recipe, and you're asking about what I advocate for, I'm exploring. And when I have clear answers, when I have, academic plus experimental, lessons, I can share that in more detail. All I can tell you right now is I'm trying everything I can, whatever mental health or consciousness experience I can go through to make sure the world can become better or I can bring some more knowledge to the world, I'm going to do it.
Okay.
Also for myself, right? But at the same time, I know it's going to be used for something, so it's quite the motivation. But I would say very basic things: stay in touch with your body, physical exercise, but not just physical exercise. Also, even just feeling yourself, kind of like like take a shower sometimes, just feel the water, just feel the body. That's it. Of course, like you said, one thing is to stop the dopamine hits and just kind of really go into more serotonin kind of mode. So if you just take a cold shower, of course, that helps because it just brings the right energy to your body. These things are little tricks that are physical, but they really work. It's not like mental health is this abstract thing. No, you produce the right hormones and it helps. That's it. It's very simple.
That's right.
And so yeah, like breathing techniques are amazing. I would say if my brain wasn't as crazy, breath work would be enough potentially without psychedelics, without anything. Like it seems like when I do it for 10 minutes, sometimes I just slow down a lot.
Yeah.
That's very I can just walk you through it. Like in my routine, I do that. I do stretching, which I never did before. I couldn't care less about my body before, and now I'm really trying it. And my body's starting to ask for it, like I feel like I need to stretch. Before I wouldn't even listen, And so stretching, breathing, meditation, like it's just the core. And if you just do it a couple times a day, perfect. If you do one time a day, if you do it for SOS situations, there's just deep breaths are just basic for resetting. Like when you have a panic attack, like the extreme cases, right? Like you just need to breathe. So
Right.
it's super simple. Now I'm talking to you guys, and I've been practicing being a bit slower, which is still hard, But it's all about breathing. If I feel like I'm going too fast, take a breath. Fine. Brain goes, slower.
Yeah.
It's super basic in a way. But on the other hand, I think there's a lot to explore, a lot for the society to accept. So I think part of my work is really, killing the taboos and just really kind of talking openly about these things. That's really kind of a basic thing that is going to have a big impact.
It's interesting, actually, just as you think about, by the way, I always go back to the story when I think of like for our industry specifically and in finance with mental health. When you think about the series Billions, right? When they had Wendy, who was the therapist that would talk to the traders who had issues, had a mental block, and they started losing money, try to get them on the right path. Which is fascinating, right, in itself, and how that whole works. But obviously, as you think about, inefficiencies, you were looking for inefficiencies in markets and opportunity. That energy level of trying to find stuff, it takes toll, right? So being able to optimize your body, your mind, to be the best version of you, I think is definitely unique.
And I would have to add, of course, that there's the health side of things, right? So mental health and health need to come together, right? Because if you eat well, you mentioned optimization. I'm just talking about that because of that. If you want to optimize, you need to control kind of when you eat certain foods, and if you eat certain foods at all, right? But even more than that, you can even optimize during the day to just peak, at a certain hour of the day by not eating, pasta before. If I had eaten pasta before this call, I would be like, no. So that's the thing, right? I think all these things are just basic tricks that, of course, for a cognitive mental brain like mine, it's easy to associate. But then, of course, putting in practice some of the habits that are more emotional, more spiritual, it's harder. But in terms of the logic of what I should do, I know it. It's just about if I really have the eagerness to do it or not. But I think nowadays there's more and more information. There's going to be more and more, I'm sure. And it's really. But that point, I mean, for 30 years, I never felt like I needed a coach or a psychologist or something, because for me, I'm too detached from numbers. I don't care. I just want to make the money, right? It's a goal, and so even sports, right? I stopped caring about my favorite sports person, whatever, because I was just trying, to use it to make money. That was my thing. It's a game. It was literally a game for me, right? And so, I think there's that detachment. But as you say, like there's a toll. There's like things that should be worked on, and I think if I didn't miss when I was 30, I didn't miss having someone like that. After I started having one, I was like, okay, but this is clear, the impact, right? Now I see. There was this blind spot I didn't see before, and now I see it, Like, for example, sometimes, the typical thing is when you're making a lot of money, you tend to go very greedy. When you're losing too much money, you tend to compensate. So, like, if you stop having ground rules, but to be completely honest, nowadays, that's a bit less important, right? Because before, you would have manual traders. But like I said, the trick of all this is to systematize the whole thing, right? So if you have code rules for everything, you don't need to touch it pretty much, right? So I really think the personal development really comes more in the sense of handling people, talking to LPs, talking to investors, having the mental kind of stability, not just stay grounded, staying with the right focus, more of a high level thing, right? So not really about performance of the trading, because for that, I can tell you, machines are better than humans. There's no, I mean, you can train for 30 years, but why train yourself if machines don't have emotions and that's it, right? Because there it's very simple. You don't need the emotions. It's as simple as that, right? So we can stop with all that thing about, oh, but they're going to replace humans, blah, blah. Of course, but that releases people to develop themselves more, work less hours, be more humans, and not be like doing this machine work all the time, you know? And so it's perfect, you know?
Yeah, that's great. Well, maybe that's a good segue here to get into more. Obviously, this is your why. You're passionate about this. We'll maybe go back to talk about the how with the fun and the strategy and what you're looking to do there. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you have a unique thought process on your strategy and format for the fund. Love to hear kind of what it looks like and how you got into that framework.
Yeah, so it's a tough one, right? Because you have a lot of discussions around jurisdiction, and now, of course, with MiCA compliance, you know, with crypto, it's tricky because European Union, as everyone knows, likes rules a lot, but, you know, facilitating the life of people who want to build value, it's a different story, you know, which I understand, you know, we need rules in society. There's a lot of sociopaths all around. I understand we need rules. At the same time, killing the honest people who are trying to do something and just, you know, taxing like crazy some people, I mean, doesn't work also, right? Because otherwise the world doesn't move forward, you know. So yeah, in terms of the fund, it was a whole long story, but we ended up doing the fund in Cayman because Cayman Islands is the only place I would say that is a good mix between it's serious, but it doesn't drive you nuts in terms of operations, price, you know, and there's hundreds of funds there. So it's like the recipe, like everyone knows how to do it, you know? And so that process started already like a year ago. It's still long. Like, it's not like it's a 1-day process to create a fund. And I decided to go all in and just put 300K up front from my personal money, just to really make sure that we have top tier auditors, fund admins, etc. So like we have, if a big fund comes and says, "Can I check you out?" The only thing they will be less happy about is the lack of track record. Of course, we have a personal track record, not the company one yet. But all the rest of the boxes they want to tick. Usually they go for a 10, 20, $30 million fund and they expect very basic protection, security, etc. We went all in, right? So I have the best custodians for crypto. I have the best legal team, etc. Because I felt like, I'm not here to make a $30 million fund, right? So if I'm thinking long term, why not start from the get-go in the right way? Because otherwise, 1 year from now, I need to change the whole structure and the whole team. And so, playing up front was my decision. It's rare. You find $100 million funds that do the same structure, but $10 million funds, usually when they are starting at least, it's very defensive, right? Because you don't want to spend money. But for me, it's an investment.
Let's talk about the investments you're making. So, like, what type of strategy are you looking around?
We have basically 60% around that high frequency trading. So basically, spot versus future arbitrage. You know, it's very simple in a way. Simple. Well, there's always intricacies, but and the other 40% is more allocated to AI and long short models, meaning we have positions open for a couple hours, but we don't at the end of the day, for example, we are expected to have all the positions closed. So it's like a very kind of, you know, high frequency setup, day trading pretty much, right? So you don't have positions open for too long. That's the most important thing there, right? I think what I would highlight there is that for a year I was building my own strategy in-house with my CTO, and my CTO is basically someone I came across together 20 years after, you know, and he was in sports betting, I was in sports betting, he was in crypto, I was in crypto, and suddenly he came to me and he's like, I shouldn't be working for someone else. I really want to build my own thing. Like, you know, do you have any hints? I'm like, do you want to join my fund? And so we just started, the two of us, you know, it was amazing. And all was kind of destiny. And then suddenly there's Alex that came in and now he's, you know, also a proper founder. And he has been helping me a lot with the personal development side of things, but also being a COO, like a ruthless COO, like he's everywhere trying to make everything work. So I can just focus on trading and fundraising pretty much, you know, and that's really important because that's really where I shine. You know, the rest is like things that people, when they don't have budget or money to put up front, they will never be able to do it because it's years of contracts, counterparty agreements, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So, it's very lucky to be in this position where you know how to make money, you have money up front, and now I surround myself with people that I really test on an energetic level. I don't want just, you know, people from traditional mindsets of finance, which is like people who are ruthless, but there's no team. It's just competition, and it's just about, you know, killing the others. I mean, we are very ruthless in the numbers because we are super objective, but you don't need to be, you know, bad people for that. You know, that's as simple as that. You know.
So let's talk a little bit about your strategy.
So we decided after a year of testing these strategies, me and my CTO, we decided to really engage in something different that, for example, Nickel Digital Assets are doing for a while, which is you go multi-manager approach, right? Which means instead of trying to create 5 perfect strategies in the house, you actually find the best managers in the world and you allocate amounts to them, right? So it's a bit of a fund of funds approach, but with the difference that the money stays with us because they integrate with our accounts. So I have a master account in the exchange, and then I give sub accounts to these different managers, and they have their own sub account.
Okay, yeah.
But every month I relocate based on their performance, based on the relationship we have with them. So we have a meeting every month to decide how much to allocate to each, right? So this is a common approach, but of course, the most common question I get is, why would these guys sell their strategies to you instead of creating their own fund? And I'm like, have you tried creating a fund? Because it's like, yeah, it's money, it's years, it's
And this is actually something I really want to dive into with you because you're at a good spot where you're about to go live. So, usually a lot of the folks that we talk to already have an established fund. What are some of the biggest struggles that you faced as you're looking to launch this fund and putting the pieces together?
Me and my CTO are traders, like by default, right? He's the guy who codes. He's the guy who has seen like all the systems in the world, the most advanced systems. I've been on the front line managing the money. The main problem is that you want to do the thing you're good at, but it's not the whole story, right? You need to optimize costs because the costs will impact the actual P&L in the end, right? So even if you made an amazing performance, doesn't matter if you made bad decisions in terms of counterparts, etc. That's why it was crucial to get operations people, to get people who are fully on kind of handling counterparts and everything. We have been optimizing. Opening a bank account has been taking months, for example, as simple as that, months. Getting the license to trade. So we went to Cayman because it was supposed to be 2 weeks to get the license to be able to be live, months already, because, there's always further questions. There's always things to iterate on. I was counting on being live in December, to be clear, right? And we are almost a year after. I mean, not almost, but, and I'm not slow. Like when I decide to do something, I move, But it was just
what have been the biggest holdups?
The license from the Cayman authorities, so you can do anything because you need to wait for the license, right? And I'm not going to go create a fund somewhere else because it's going to take even longer, I know. And then even just discussions with like the exchanges to get fee deals and stuff like that, to make sure that you get the best possible deal so it becomes feasible, because otherwise the fees eat your profits. That's what I was saying. You need to make sure when you go live that you can perform the way you want to perform on a personal account. Because in personal accounts, you don't have all these things, all these extra costs and all of that, It's fine.
Well, it's what you're saying really resonates because I mean the reason we actually started this podcast. So Skylar and I came from the fund administration business, and we talked to a lot of folks like you. They're great traders, they're great investors, and it comes, what the hell is a fund administrator? Why do I need this?
I can tell you that actually we have NAV Consulting. NAV Consulting do hundreds of funds. And they are the only ones I know that do properly kind of high frequency trading. Like we can do millions of trades per month and they can, just do all the reconciliation and everything. But the funny thing is, I do think the NAV Consulting, like the fund admin, is actually the easy part, to be honest, because they are going to provide a portal to the investors, so they are going to make it smoother for the process to move forward. It's really more the fact that you're going to be audited. So, you have to have everything in place, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of things that need to be properly done. But funny enough, I think fund admin is the only thing that I haven't questioned twice, so hopefully it's going to stay that way. But it's interesting, like we changed auditor because suddenly we realized the auditor we were planning to have had some legal issues, and we don't want to start with someone that's a bit stained. I mean, and the best legal team in the world, in terms of Cayman, is a team that also kind of helps you a lot, and they have a tier 1 name, but at the same time, sometimes things drag a bit more than you want, like I can tell you these 8 months of delay comes from time to make the documents, the legal documents, right? So all iterations take a couple months. License for the fund to be operating, which we have to wait for the legal documents to even submit, right? And then we have to wait a couple more months. And now the same thing for the banks and counterparts, because I want to onboard with all the custodians, banks, etc. But part of this process requires the license from Cayman. So we are trying to do as much as we can, but we still need to wait a bit, right? So I have to say, I'm talking about all the things that are the worst things, the things I hate, but this is the thing that really makes people question whether doing the fund is worth it, because you think it's easy. You pay this money, you get the license, you trade, you make money for investors, they invest more. But you need to think of all the things that are going to hurt your performance, just because of the operational stuff, And so, I mean, of course, I'm not trying to get the competition away. I'm just saying it's hard.
That makes sense. And there's a lot of, like you said, model moving pieces. Now it becomes more of a vendor management situation. Then everybody has to talk to one another too, right? they still wiggle audit, tax, and that gets
and I'm
pretty.
super lucky because I do have people with me, and I delegate a lot, right? If I didn't, it was just purely impossible. I have to say, like I don't believe I would have gotten through this because it would take like twice as much at least. And then like you just give up because you just start making calculations and you're like, is it actually going to be worth it, But I think for the long term mission, I'm still up for it, and I think. The funny thing, and that's an important thing, we have two funds. We have a dollar fund, the BTC fund, right? So people can invest dollars with us, but also Bitcoin. And if they invest Bitcoin, they get yield on Bitcoin, which is the most on-demand product nowadays.
Yeah.
And the funny thing, and that's really what changed my perspective about this, all my life was sacrifice, reward, and deep sacrifice. It's martyr mode, like let's just do everything we can. And now with the fundraising, it's been interesting because I thought I would have to raise all traditional money, go through months of due diligence, and be in a very hard position, even more with the fund still not live. But I do have fund of funds investing already. I do have Bitcoin holders who hold dozens of Bitcoins, but are not like family office or very complex structures investing as individuals, right? And I end up meeting people who really want to change the world. So I have a lot of Bitcoin investors that actually want to be part of the board of the foundation or want to be part of the whole process, right? And so that's really what has been like mind-blowing, like finding a couple introducers to the fund that really can bring a lot of investors, but that really share with you context of people that are good people that energizes you, right? If I was spending all my day with people I don't like, would be harder. Like I'm spending time with potential investors that I definitely will have in my network even after the fund or independently of the fund. And that gives you an extra energy because you spend a good time and you also think, okay, the fund is up and running, but if there's other directions I'll go after, in 10 years or whatever, there's really a lot of interesting people, nice people in the world, and I'm learning that, so it's good.
That's pretty cool.
So Francisco, tell us about your roadmap, kind of where, you're about to go live, kind of how do you see this developing in the next couple of years? And what do you, what in 5 years, 10 years, what would be like, we did it right?
That's the most exciting part. Yeah. Like that's why I feed myself from that question, right? So first of all, the fund itself, right? The fund itself, I think we are going to start, 15, 20 million. I think it's my best guess because some people haven't confirmed. I'm just saying the ones that are more sure, like they still can go a bit higher. I believe if we perform the way we claim to perform, and that's really the idea, of course, so I'm expecting around 30% annualized on the dollar, before fees, of course, but still 30%, and on Bitcoin with a penalty, so maybe 15 to 20, right? If we perform that, consistently with low drawdowns, like we say, because my main concern is not losing money, that's why we have all these different strategies, all the different managers, diversifying the risk. If it all goes well, I think we can reach 100 million in a year, to be honest, because all the people that are trying and testing now, they are testing with small amounts. And if they're already adding up to 15 or 20 million, it's going to be quite promising. Once you're on $100 million fund, things change. Technically, you start to go for more serious tickets, 10 to 20 million tickets at once, right? And by then, there's due diligence, there's all this making the process more serious and stuff, but that's what we are protecting against. Like we are really defining everything in a way that if a $100 million kind of stage comes like tomorrow, we are ready, and that's really interesting. But in terms of roadmap, I would say 1 to 2 years to get to 100 million. In 3 to 5 years, I guess all these inefficiencies in crypto are also going to start to shrink, which is a good timing because then we already have the LPs and the kind of the trust and the relationship to really go in different directions potentially. Because my thing is to find efficiencies. I'm not restricted to crypto or to this specific business, right? So I think, building a connection with LPs in the next 1 or 2 years, getting to 100 million, and then 3 to 5 years, start to diversify more, potentially creating even a wealth management umbrella and just really getting investors to put even more of their net worth and not just...
The bigger part I wanted you to hit on is the health and the consciousness aspect.
I know. That's what but I'm going to get too excited, So the plan is simple. 1 to 2 years, again, the same type of thing until we are generating proper money. I'm feeding it with my own personal money still, right? So it's just really about financing research. I'm still going to keep going with my own psychedelic experiences and all these things to make sure that I know what's out there, I know what makes sense, and what I should be paying research for. But the main pillars of the foundation, I think we are talking 3 to 5 years away because it's the timeline for having proper money in 4 main pillars, right? So one pillar is going to continue to be research. I think having a research team that keeps seeing what's best, and you see people like Joe Dispenza who are doing amazing work, right? Very systematic research, like really showing what people should be doing, the good habits, etc. Second pillar, investing in companies like a VC, but not VC, right? So it's a VC, but mentality of VC, so optimizing the investment, but not optimizing for impact. Sorry, not optimizing for return, but optimizing for impact, right? So you don't want to be like a VC that needs to explain to investors why they're putting money here or there. I want to bring the money from the fund, and now it's my money. I don't need to explain to anyone. I can define metrics of impact and optimize for those, right? But then, of course, make it super professional, just like a VC, right? Pre-filtering, filtering companies and investing, right? The third pillar would be partnerships, right? So I may not invest in a company, but I may just do a project specifically with the company, right? Or with a university or, And the fourth pillar is policy making. I think you get to a point, and I've been thinking a lot about building a school, alternative teaching methods, right? Because the education now it's completely screwed. It's all cognitive intelligence, zero emotional intelligence, zero. So there's all these alternative methods like Montessori, like all these new things that are coming now. But I thought of doing like a private school of my own, like now with a kid also, like it made sense. But then my wife challenges me a lot on the left side, which is like, okay, but you make a private school, what about everyone else? And I did try to get a bit more into the political side and like try to see what we can do in terms of changing the law to make sure that this is more of a movement rather than just a private school. But it's a tricky balance there. Like I still don't know if it's going to work out if I spend my time instead of doing private things that are going to have a big impact, actually try to change policies and stuff, because that's a lot more work, right? And particularly in Portugal, where I am now, you wouldn't be able to do anything real because it's just corruption. It's just kind of, people who are trying to just promote their own interests, So either there's a big change or I'm wasting my time. And so in that sense, that's why people go for entrepreneurship and just don't care about politics, because, if you can make the impact without touching something that's still tainted now and it's very kind of corrupt. But again, next 5 to 10 years, I'm hearing people and I'm meeting more and more people that keep pulling me in that direction of like, no, but we can change. We can, and with money, of course, you can do a lot, right? So it's always kind of the unlocking factor. And that's why it's very kind of good to have a type of business that really generates money as a default, right? And so that's my 4 pillars of focus. But I would tell you that my heart and what my intuition tells me now is that it's going to really be strongly about psychedelics and this type of thing. Again, I do think breath work and stuff does amazing, and you can really just change based on that. But there's some people with deep trauma, and I think that really needs something more strong that really rewires you, right? Because we see a little version of what the world actually is, and we think that's the whole world, right? Because it's our perception, but our perception is like a little thing, And suddenly when we open up and we see everything, or at least partially, it's crazy, right? And it changes the whole perspective. That's the experience I've been having, and I believe when you shut your thoughts out, for a while, you just see the whole picture and it just changes the whole thing for you, So I'm going to keep doing the research, both with my personal experience, but also with proper academic research. But it's exciting, and I'm happy to partner. Anyone who's listening that's excited about this field and wants to be part of this movement, please reach out. I'm going to be openly, an advocate for this field, and hopefully, more and more practically speaking, and with scale.
That's really cool. And then you mentioned something earlier. I mean, I'd love to hear kind of maybe any books, or you mentioned Joe Dispenza. Obviously, his book Superhuman's great. Anything else as far as research that you would advise or point somebody?
Definitely. Yeah, sure. Like The Untethered Soul is quite interesting. It's a nice book. I think there's a couple, if people look for leadership books that are more about self-development, they'll find the right spot, because leadership shouldn't be about, projecting in others and focusing on the rest of the world. But you have, I think The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck is the first book that changed my life, I would say. I mean, I was kind of getting ready for it, of course, otherwise it wouldn't work. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, also, Stephen Covey. These were the first for me. But recently, The Untethered Soul, I liked it a lot. All the work from these people, Joe Dispenza, I think it's amazing. I listen a lot to Larry of a CEO, the podcast, of course. He invites a lot of people that are more into psychology, neuroscience, and we have been doing amazing guests, to be honest. Like, it's a podcast I love to follow. But to be honest, I think it starts with awareness, self-awareness, more than theoretical knowledge, because you can read a book, think, oh, it makes all the sense, but you only project on the others, you don't see it for yourself. And in entrepreneurship, we see that a lot, because I try to build things, but I'm not saying most, but a lot of people in this society now have the habit of going to social media just to comment on others and project on others, right? Rather than focusing on their own problems. And if you want to be more of a creator and someone self-aware rather than someone who just kind of lashes on others rather than fixing yourself, yeah, I mean, I feel like this needs to change overall, and you can read all the self-help books, but if you don't really put it to practice and like really take accountability first, self-awareness first, then the embodiment and kind of, trying to really live it, and then things will change. You will rewire yourself. The concept I like the most in life is neuroplasticity, right? Like we can change whatever, right? As long as we build new habits, change the neural pathways, we can build new habits, right?
Yeah.
And so it's as simple as that. You can change whatever you can about you. It's not going to be about forcing it. It needs to be a consistent habit, even if you just do it 5 minutes a day. That's what I've been holding on to. All the breathing, all these techniques every day, 5 to 10 minutes, stretching, running a little bit, feeling the body. As simple as that. And you feel more grounded, you feel more in connection with others.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems simple
good.
to be honest. It's not because
It always sounds simple. It's good stuff though, Francisco. I think this is a good spot to wrap up. Thank you for joining us. This has been a lot of fun. Like taking up a few things here and there, even learning about your journey, like starting a fund. Where can people go to connect with you and learn more about what you're working on?
LinkedIn could be the best way for now. We are going to launch the proper foundation website very soon, but it's not live yet. Yeah, through LinkedIn, of course, I'm going to keep announcing the things that are new and all the things that are coming. So I think that's a good way to do it. I'm also doing more of X, But I would say LinkedIn is a bit more for the kind of big picture movement and like all that I'm doing. And then X is a bit more like personal opinions. I share a lot about Bitcoin also in general, of course, because it's part of the research and of the fund. But I think, between those two could be the best.
Amazing. Yeah, well, this has been great, Francisco. We'll make sure to include all that content info in the show notes as well.